thing about working dispatch that nobody tells you is the silence. Not the silence between calls. There's never much of that, but the silence after, the silence when a call ends and you don't know if the person you were talking to is still alive. You sit in your chair with your headset on and you stare at the CAD screen and you wait for the update from the responding unit. And in that gap, that 30-second to 3-minute window where you know nothing, you are the most useless person in the world. You did your job. You took the information. You sent the help. And now you just sit there. I've been a dispatcher for Kendrick County Emergency Services for 6 years. My name is Maya Rivas and I work the overnight shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 nights on, 3 off. I chose nights because the calls are worse and the staffing is thinner, and the margin between someone living and dying gets razor narrow after midnight, when the roads are empty and the nearest ambulance might be 20 minutes out instead of 8. I want to be the person on the other end of the line when the margin matters most. That probably sounds noble. It isn't. My brother Tomas died in a car accident when I was 20. A drunk driver clipped his sedan on Route 9 and sent it into a drainage ditch at 11:40 on a Tuesday night. Tomas called 911 from the ditch. He was conscious, he was bleeding, but he was talking. The dispatcher sent an ambulance. It came from St. Francis 14 miles east because the closer unit from Mercy General was on another call. A woman who turned out to be having a panic attack and not a cardiac event. The ambulance took 19 minutes. Tomas was dead in 12. I don't blame the dispatcher who took his call. She did everything right. The system did everything right. It just wasn't fast enough. And I decided, in the particular way that grief makes decisions for you, that I would spend my life making it faster. That I would be the person who shaved off those extra minutes. Who made the right call about which unit to send, who never ever let someone die in a ditch waiting for help. That was just a little too far away. So that's who I am. That's what you need to understand about me before I tell you the rest. It started on a Tuesday, October 14th. I was 4 hours into my shift, settled into the rhythm. A domestic disturbance on Whitfield, a fender bender on the I-94 on-ramp, a teenager who'd locked herself in a bathroom and called 911 because she was afraid of her mother's boyfriend. Routine. Derek was at the console next to mine, handling the west side while I took east. We'd been partners on the night shift for 2 years, and we had an easy shorthand, the kind you build when you spend 12 hours in a room with someone 4 nights a week. He'd slide his chair over when I needed a bathroom break. I'd bring him coffee from the vending machine without asking. Small things that keep you sane. At 11:47 p.m., my console lit up with an incoming call. I picked it up the way I always do. 911. What's your emergency? What I heard was a woman's voice mid-sentence, like the call had connected partway through her scream. The intersection, he just... Oh God, he's not moving. There's blood on the... Please. The car came through the red light. Millbrook and a 4th. Please send someone. He's not breathing. I was already typing. Ma'am, I'm dispatching EMS to Millbrook and 4th. Can you tell me? The line went dead. Not a click, not a fade, just gone. Like someone had pulled a plug from the wall. I checked my console. The call was logged, but the timestamp was wrong. It read October 21st, next Tuesday, a full week away. I stared at it for probably 10 seconds. Which is a long time when you're on the clock. Then I flagged it as a system error in the log, made a note about the corrupted timestamp, and moved on. We'd been having intermittent issues with the phone system all month. Dropped calls, garbled caller IDs, calls that showed up in the log but never rang through. IT had come out twice and replaced a bunch of cabling and told us the VoIP migration was causing transitional artifacts. I figured this was another one. I didn't dispatch anyone to Millbrook and 4th. There was no active emergency at that intersection. I checked. Traffic cameras showed an empty street, wet with rain. One set of headlights a quarter mile out. Nothing. I forgot about it. On October 21st, a Tuesday at 11:51 p.m., a Honda Accord ran a red light at the intersection of Millbrook and 4th Street and struck a pedestrian named Gerald Kessler, age 71, who was crossing with a walker. The caller, a woman named Dana Pritchard, who'd been sitting at the red light in the opposite lane, called 911 at 11:52. Her voice was hysterical. She said the car came through the red light. She said he wasn't breathing. She said there was blood on the crosswalk. I wasn't the one who took her call. I was off that night. But I saw the incident report the next day, and something cold settled into the base of my skull and stayed there. I went back to the call log from October 14th and played the recording of the flagged call. The voice was identical. Not similar, identical. The same cadence, the same broken syntax, the same ragged breathing between words. Dana Pritchard had called 911 a week before the accident happened. I told myself it was impossible. I told myself the timestamp was corrupted and the call had actually come in on the 21st and been misfiled. I told myself this for about 2 days, during which I checked the system logs 6 times, confirmed that the call was recorded on the 14th by the server, verified that the audio file's metadata matched, and ran out of ways to explain it. Gerald Kessler died at Kendrick General at 3:14 a.m. on October 22nd. He was 71 years old and he had a walker and he was crossing the street and I had a week's warning and I did nothing because I thought it was a glitch. The second call came 3 nights later. October 24th, 2:16 a.m. Same pattern. My console lit up, I answered, and I heard a voice mid-sentence, breathless, urgent. A man this time. Smell smoke. I think it's coming from downstairs. The whole hallway is. Jesus Christ. The smoke is black. I can't. I'm at 412 Oleander, apartment 3B. I have my daughter with me. She's 7. Please. The line died. The timestamp read October 29th. I sat there with my hands over my keyboard and I felt my pulse in my fingertips. The address was real. 4120 Oleander was a low-rise apartment building in the Eastwick neighborhood. 30 units, mostly families. The caller hadn't given a name, but he'd said apartment 3B, and he'd said his daughter was 7. I had 5 days. The version of me that existed before Gerald Kessler would have logged it as another system error. But Gerald Kessler was dead because I'd done the safe thing, the procedural thing, the thing that let me sleep at night. So I did the other thing. I didn't dispatch a fire unit, I couldn't justify that. Not without an active emergency. But I called the Kendrick County Fire Marshal's office the next morning from my personal phone and reported a concern about fire safety at 4120 Oleander. I told them I'd driven past and noticed what looked like exposed wiring near the electrical panel in the parking garage. It was a lie, but it was the kind of lie that gets an inspection scheduled. The inspector went out on October 27th. He found a faulty junction box in the basement utility room. Corroded contacts, scorch marks on the housing, the kind of thing that could throw sparks if it arced. He flagged it. The building management replaced the box on October 28th. On October 29th, nothing happened at 4120 Oleander. No fire, no smoke. No man with a 7-year-old daughter calling 911 from a black hallway. I saved them. Whatever was going to happen, I stopped it. I sat in my car in the dispatch center parking lot after my shift, and I cried in a way I hadn't cried since Tomas's funeral. Not from grief, but from something close to joy, or maybe relief, or maybe just the feeling of the universe offering me something I thought I'd never get. A second chance to be fast enough. 2 more calls came over the next week. A gas leak at a restaurant on Chambers Street. I tipped off the health department. They found a cracked supply line. Nobody died. A hidden run on Palmer Avenue. I couldn't figure out how to prevent it without explaining things I couldn't explain. So I anonymously called the non-emergency line and reported a streetlight outage at that intersection, which got a repair crew out, which meant the intersection was well lit and coned off when the day came, which meant the driver saw the pedestrian and swerved in time. It was clumsy. It was improvised. But it worked. 4 calls. 3 lives saved, 1 lost. I could live with those numbers. I was getting better at this. Then the call came on November 5th, and I killed someone. It was 1:33 a.m. A woman's voice, flat and controlled. The way people sound when they've gone past panic into something mechanical. There's been a stabbing at the Quick Stop on Delancey. A man walked in, and I think the clerk is dead. There's a lot of blood. The man is still here. He's just standing in the aisle. He's not moving. Timestamp, November 10th. 5 days out. I should have been more careful. I should have thought about what prevention actually means when violence is involved. When you're not fixing a junction box or a streetlight, but trying to stop a human being from doing something they haven't decided to do yet. But I was running on 4 saves, and the certainty that the universe had given me this gift for a reason. And I made the call. I dispatched a patrol unit to the quick stop on Delancey with a report of a suspicious individual. I logged it as an anonymous tip called in to the non-emergency line and rerouted to my console. It was against protocol. It was falsifying a dispatch record. I didn't care. Officers Herrera and Park arrived at the quick stop at 1:58 a.m. on November 5th. 5 days before the stabbing was supposed to happen. They found nothing. No suspicious individual. The clerk, a 19-year-old kid named Amir Osman, was stocking shelves. The officers walked the aisles, checked the parking lot, told Amir to call if he saw anything, and left as they were pulling out of the parking lot. A man named Steve Kellogg walked out of the quick stop with a case of beer he hadn't paid for. He saw the patrol car. He ran east on Delancey, across the sidewalk into the street. He collided with a woman named Patricia Huang, who was walking home from a late shift at the hospital. Patricia stumbled off the curb. A delivery truck hit her at 35 miles an hour. Patricia Huang was 44 years old. She was an overnight phlebotomist at Kendrick General. She had a 13-year-old son. She died on the sidewalk on Delancey Street. Because I sent a patrol car to a convenience store to prevent a stabbing that might not have happened for 5 more days. And a man with a stolen case of beer saw the car and ran. If I hadn't made that call, Steve Kellogg would have walked out of the quick stop with his beer, and nobody would have been there to spook him. And Patricia Huang would have walked home and gone to bed and woken up in the morning and driven her son to school. I killed her. Not the driver, not Kellogg, me. I didn't sleep for 2 days. On the 3rd day I went to my shift, and I sat at my console and another call came in, future dated November 16th. A woman describing a carbon monoxide leak in her home. And I didn't do anything. I logged it. I noted the timestamp. I put my hands in my lap and I stared at the screen. On November 16th, 2 people were hospitalized from carbon monoxide poisoning at the address the caller had described. They both survived, but barely. The husband had brain damage. He was 63. I could have prevented it. A tip to the gas company. A wellness check. Anything. Instead, I'd sat on my hands because I was afraid of creating another Patricia Huang. And now a 63-year-old man couldn't remember his wife's name because I was too scared to act. Do you see the trap? I see it now, clearly, the way you see the shape of a cage only once you're inside it. Act, and your intervention might kill someone who would have lived. Don't act, and people die from the thing you could have stopped. There is no clean choice. There is no right answer. There is only you and the information and the knowledge that, whatever you do, someone will pay for it. The calls kept coming. Every 3 or 4 days, another one future dated, another emergency that hadn't happened yet, and I sat there each time, frozen, trying to calculate the incalculable. Will this one save someone or kill someone? Is this a junction box I can fix from a distance? Or a patrol car that will spook a man into the street? I started making myself sick, trying to decide. I lost 11 pounds in 3 weeks. Derek noticed. "You look like hell," he said one night, rolling his chair close to mine while we waited for the shift change. "And you've been logging weird calls. I see the flags in the system. Corrupted timestamps. No callback numbers. What's going on?" "Bad phone system," I said. "Maya." He said my name the way he said it. When he thought I was about to make a mistake on a dispatch. Steady, no judgment, just attention. "You dispatched a unit to the quick stop on Delancey 3 weeks ago off an anonymous tip that doesn't exist in the call log." I checked. Okafor hasn't noticed yet, but she will. I should have kept lying. I should have told him I'd made a mistake and moved on. Instead, I pulled up the call log, played him the recording from October 14th, Dana Pritchard's voice, describing Gerald Kessler's death a week before it happened, and then showed him the incident report from October 21st. Then I played the November 5th recording and showed him the incident report for the quick stop. Then I played the November 10th recording, the stabbing call, and told him to check the date. He listened to all of it without speaking. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Show me the metadata." We spent the rest of the shift going through the server logs. Derek was better with the technical side than I was before dispatch. He'd done 2 years in the county's IT department. He confirmed what I already knew. The calls were logged by the server at the timestamps I'd reported. They weren't misfiled, they weren't spliced. The audio files were created on the dates shown, and the content described events that hadn't occurred yet. "This isn't a system error," he said, and I could see him trying to fit it into a framework that made sense and failing. "These calls are originating from your console, not incoming. The phone system has no record of an external connection. The system shows them as incoming calls, but there's no trunk line activity, no SIP handshake, nothing. It's like the console generated them internally." "That's impossible." "Yeah." He pulled off his headset. "It's all impossible, Maya. That's the part that bothers me." We spent the next 2 nights digging. Derek pulled maintenance records, system logs, firmware update histories. I pulled personnel records, and that's how I found Elaine Marsh. Elaine had been the primary overnight dispatcher on my console for 3 years before I transferred in. She'd left 6 months before I started, taken administrative leave for personal health reasons, and never come back. Her file had a forwarding address in Tucson, and a cell number that I stared at for an entire shift before calling. She picked up on the second ring. When I told her my name and said I was working her old console, she was quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. "You're getting the calls," she said. "It wasn't a question. How did you?" "Because that's what it does. It finds the person at that console who cares the most, who can't stand to hear someone in trouble and not do something about it, and it gives you exactly what you think you want." Elaine talked for an hour. She told me the calls had started for her gradually, 1 a week, then 2, then every other night. She told me she'd acted on them at first, like I had, and she'd saved people like I had. And then she'd started creating disasters with her interventions, like I had. She told me she'd tried every strategy, acting on some, ignoring others, acting differently, acting indirectly, and that the outcomes kept twisting. Not randomly, specifically. As if whatever was sending the calls was learning from her responses and calibrating. "It's not showing you the future." Elaine said, "It's showing you a future one that changes depending on what you do. And it's picking the ones that will hurt the most, either way." "Why?" "I don't know. I don't know if it's a why kind of thing. I just know that the calls need someone to listen, someone to care. If you stop caring, if you could just hear them and feel nothing, I think they'd stop. But you can't. That's why it chose you. That's why it chose me." "What happened when you stopped answering?" Another long silence. When Elaine spoke again, her voice had changed, lower, thinner, like she was pressing the phone close to her mouth and speaking very quietly. "I stopped for 4 days. Logged every call, didn't act on any of them. On the 5th day, Derek, or whoever was on the next console, got a call. Not a future call, a regular 911 call. A woman saying she'd been in a car accident on Route 9. Dispatch sent an ambulance. When the ambulance got there, there was no accident. But while that ambulance was out on a false call, a real cardiac arrest came in on the east side, and the only available unit was 19 minutes away. Did they? He died. 68 years old, his name was Martin Chen, and when I pulled the recording of the call that sent the ambulance to Route 9, the voice on it was mine, Maya voice calling from my console. A call I never made. I couldn't speak for a while after that. Elaine let the silence sit. "It used you," I said finally. "When I stopped feeding it, it fed itself, used my voice, my console, my credentials. And it didn't send calls about the future. It made false calls in the present that pulled resources away from real emergencies. People died, not because of what I did, but because of what I stopped doing. So there's no way out. I'm in Tucson, Maya. I haven't taken a dispatch call in 6 months. No future calls, no false calls, nothing. It stopped when I left. Then it worked. You got out. And 6 months later, you started getting the calls." Her voice was flat. "I didn't get out. I just passed it on. It moved to whoever sat at that console next, to whoever cared the most. Derek was reading over my shoulder by then. I hadn't realized he'd come up behind me. He'd heard enough. We sat together in the parking lot after the call and didn't speak for a long time, watching the sky go gray with dawn. "You can't quit," he said. "If you quit, it'll go to whoever replaces you. And if I stay, people die when I act, and people die when I don't. Then we figure out a third option." I loved Derek for saying we. I don't mean romantically, I mean in the way you love someone who stands next to you in the dark and says we instead of you. He didn't have to be in this. He chose to be, and that's what made what happened next so much worse. The calls continued through November. I developed a system, or tried to, for each call. I'd assess the emergency type, map out the likely intervention paths, try to predict whether my involvement would help or harm. It was like playing chess against an opponent who could see the whole board when I could only see 3 squares ahead. I saved a few people, I got a few wrong. The math was brutal, and I stopped keeping a tally because the numbers made me nauseous. Then, on December 3rd at 3:47 a.m., a call came in that broke every pattern I'd built. The voice on the line was Derek's. Not someone who sounded like Derek. Derek, his voice, his cadence, the slight whistle on his S sounds from the gap in his lower teeth, and he was screaming, "Maya, Maya, listen to me. You have to get out of the building. It's in the... Something's wrong with the console. It's... Oh fuck, oh god, it's coming through the line cut. Timestamp December 8th, 5 days." I looked at Derek. He was at his console, 6 feet away from me, filling out a call report. Alive, typing, normal. He glanced over and saw my face, and the color drained from his. "What?" he said. I played him the recording. He listened to his own voice screaming, and I watched his hands go white around the edge of the desk. "That's me," he said. "That's Maya, that's me." Every other call had described events at a distance, intersections, apartment buildings, convenience stores, places I had no connection to. This was different. This was inside the dispatch center. This was Derek. Whatever was sending the calls had stopped reaching outward and started reaching in. I spent the next 4 days barely sleeping. I went over every inch of the dispatch center, the wiring, the consoles, the server room, and the basement. I pulled blueprints from the county records office. I had Derek run diagnostics on every piece of hardware connected to my console. Nothing. The equipment was normal. The building was normal. There was nothing wrong with anything except the impossible calls coming from a day that hadn't arrived yet. On December 7th, 1 day before the timestamp, I made a decision. I told Derek not to come to work the next night. He refused. "If something's going to happen at the dispatch center, you need someone there with you." The call described you screaming. You were in the building. If you're not in the building, then maybe nothing happens, and maybe something worse happens. We've been through this, Maya. You know how this works? Every time you try to dodge one outcome, it gives you another one. He was right. I knew he was right, but I'd spent 6 years trying to be fast enough, precise enough, good enough to save the people I was supposed to save. And I was not going to sit behind a console and listen to Derek die in real time because I couldn't figure out a third option. So I found one. At 6:45 p.m. on December 8th, 15 minutes before our shift, I walked into Captain Okafor's office and told her there was a credible threat against the dispatch center. I told her I'd received an anonymous call describing an attack on the building during the overnight shift. I told her we needed to relocate overnight operations to the backup facility on Grayson Road. Okafor looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "What anonymous call? When? There's nothing in the log. It came to my personal phone. I'm reporting it now. Maya, I can't relocate an entire dispatch operation on the basis of a call to your cell phone that I can't verify. Do you understand what that involves? People could die. People could die every night. That's the job. I need evidence. I need a case number. I need something I can take to the chief." She wasn't wrong. She was doing her job. She was being responsible. And responsibility was going to get Derek killed. I walked out of her office and I called in a bomb threat. I used a prepaid phone I bought at a gas station that morning. I called the county's non-emergency line and said there was an explosive device in the Kendrick County Emergency Services building. set to detonate at midnight. I gave enough detail to be credible. I described the building's layout, the server room in the basement, the utility closet on the second floor. I made it real. Within 40 minutes, the building was evacuated. Overnight dispatch was rerouted to the backup facility on Grayson Road. The bomb squad came and swept the building and found nothing, because there was nothing to find. But by then, it was past midnight and the skeleton crew was operating from Grayson Road and Derek was alive, answering calls from a folding table in a room that smelled like mildew and old coffee. Nothing happened at the dispatch center that night. No explosion, no attack, no screaming. The building sat empty and dark, and nothing came through the console because nobody was sitting at it. I know what you're thinking, so the intervention worked, you dodged it. But you're wrong, because you're thinking about it the way I used to, as if the future is a single line, and you can step off it. Elaine tried to tell me, the calls don't show you the future. They show you a future, and when you change it, they adjust. The call came 4 days later, December 12th, 4:20 a.m. But this time, it wasn't my console that rang. It was Derek's. He was at his station at the backup facility. I was next to him. His console lit up and he answered the way he always does. 911, what's your emergency? And I watched his face go slack. He held the headset out to me without a word. I put it to my ear and heard my own voice. Not a recording, not a playback. My voice, Liv, speaking in a cadence I recognized as mine, but saying words I'd never said. Derek is going to die on the 15th. It doesn't matter where he is, it doesn't matter what you do. You've been trying to save people from behind a screen for 6 years and it's never been enough and it's never going to be enough. You couldn't save Tomas, you can't save Derek, you can't save anyone. All you can do is choose who dies. The line went dead. Timestamp, December 15th. I sat very still for a very long time. Derek was watching me. He'd heard enough from my side to understand. 3 days, he said. Yeah. What did it say? I told him. All of it, including the part about Tomas. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he said something that changed everything. It's trying to make you stop. I looked at him. Think about it. He said, every call, every impossible choice. It's not trying to get you to act or not act. It's trying to get you to give up, to believe that nothing you do matters. That's the pattern, Maya. That's what it's been doing since the beginning. It gives you a win to hook you, then it twists your intervention into a disaster. Then it shows you that not intervening is just as bad. And now it's telling you directly, you can't save anyone. It wants you to believe that. Why? Because if you believe it, you stop. And Elaine said when she stopped, it started using her voice to make false calls. If you give up, if you decide you can't save anyone, you become the weapon. Your voice, your credentials, your access to the system. It doesn't need you to make the calls. It just needs you to stop caring enough to notice when it makes them for you. I stared at him. He was right. I could feel it in my chest, in the place where the weight of every dead person I hadn't saved, pressed down like a hand. The calls weren't trying to destroy me through action or inaction. They were trying to destroy me through despair. To break the thing inside me that couldn't stand to hear someone screaming and not pick up the phone. December 15th came. I didn't evacuate the building. I didn't reroute dispatch. I didn't call in a threat. I showed up for my shift and I sat at my console and I put on my headset and I waited. Derek sat next to me. I'd told him to stay home. He'd told me to go to hell. His exact words, he was good at that, at being exactly who he was when it mattered. At 11 p.m., my console began to ring. Not a single call. A cascade, call after call after call, stacking up faster than the system could process them. Everyone tagged with a future date, everyone describing a different emergency. Voices I didn't recognize screaming about fires, crashes, shootings, collapses, dozens of them, then hundreds. The screen filled with entries and kept scrolling. The audio blurred into a wall of noise, a chorus of people in agony, all of them calling for help, all of them dying in futures that hadn't happened yet. I wanted to mute it. I wanted to rip the headset off. I wanted to cover my ears and close my eyes and let it wash over me like every other terrible thing I'd sat through in 6 years of doing this job. I wanted to stop caring, and I almost did. For about 5 seconds, I felt the switch inside me start to flip. The one that every dispatcher knows. The one that lets you hang up on a dead line and take the next call. The one that turns a person's worst moment into a data point on your screen. I almost let it flip all the way. I almost became the thing the calls wanted me to become. Derek grabbed my hand. He didn't say anything. He just held on. I kept my headset on. I listened to every call, not to act on them. I knew by now that acting on them was a coin flip at best. I listened because that was the thing I could do. That was the thing that made me a dispatcher and not a switchboard. I could hear them. I could acknowledge that they were real. I could carry the weight of knowing without letting it crush me into nothing. The cascade lasted until 3:14 a.m., 4 hours and 14 minutes. When it stopped, the silence was absolute. Not dispatch silence where you're waiting for an update, real silence. The kind where you can hear the fluorescent lights buzzing. My console was blank. Every future dated call had vanished from the log. The server showed no record of any of them. 4 hours of audio, gone. Derek was still holding my hand. He was pale and shaking, and his headset was around his neck, and I realized he'd been listening too. Not to my console, but to his own. He'd heard the same thing. The same cascade. The same wall of voices. "You heard it," I said. "All of it." His voice was hoarse. "Maya, I need to tell you something. The calls on my console, they weren't dated for next week. They were dated for tonight, and they were describing things that already happened. The same events, the same voices, but everything was in the past tense. Like someone was replaying. Them, I didn't understand what that meant. Not then. I do now." The call stopped after that night, completely. No more future dates, no more phantom calls, no more voices. My console rang when real people called 911, and it stayed silent when they didn't. For 3 weeks, nothing. I started sleeping again. I started eating. I went back to my routine. 12-hour shifts, 4 on, 3 off. I visited Tomas's grave on what would have been his 31st birthday, and I told him I was okay, which was almost true. The weight was still there. But it was the normal weight, the kind that every dispatcher carries, not the impossible kind. Captain Okafor investigated the bomb threat. They traced the prepaid phone to the gas station where I had bought it, but the security camera footage was too grainy for an ID. I was questioned along with everyone else. I lied. I said I had no idea who would do such a thing. Okafor looked at me for a long time after I said that, and I could see her deciding whether to push. She didn't. I think she knew on some level, but she let it go. And then on January 4th, Derek called me at home. It was 2 a.m. I was off that night. He was mid-shift. His voice was steady, the way it always was when something was really wrong. Derek got calmer as things got worse, which is what made him good at the job. "Maya, I need you to listen to me. I'm getting calls. The timestamps are wrong. They're showing dates for next week." The room tilted. I sat on the edge of my bed and pressed the phone against my ear hard enough to hurt. "Derek, don't answer them. I already answered 3. The first one describes a house fire on Waverly, a family of 4, 2 kids under 10. Don't act on them. Don't dispatch. Don't call anyone. Don't. A family of 4, Maya, 2 kids. And there it was. The thing I'd known was coming since Elaine told me about Tucson. The calls hadn't stopped, they'd moved. I hadn't broken the cycle during the cascade. I'd survived it, and in surviving it, I'd proven that I couldn't be broken. So it found someone who could. Derek, who sat next to me 4 nights a week, who brought me coffee without being asked, who grabbed my hand in the dark and held on while the world screamed. Derek, who had 2 daughters of his own, 9 and 6. I drove to the dispatch center. I broke every speed limit between my apartment and the building, and I walked through the door and I sat down next to Derek and I said, "Show me." He showed me. 3 calls, future dated, describing real addresses, a house fire, a highway pileup, a woman drowning in a bathtub. 3 people or families who would die next week if nobody intervened. "I can't just sit here," he said. "I know. You sat here for weeks. You answered the calls and you tried to save people, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't, and you kept going. I watched you do it. I can't just..." Derek, I took his headset off. I set it on the desk. I looked at him and I said the hardest thing I've ever said to another person. Harder than telling my mother about Tomas. Harder than anything. "You have to transfer off nights. You have to leave this console tomorrow and let whoever replaces me know. Listen to me." Elaine left and it went to me. "If I leave, it'll go to whoever's next. If you leave, it'll go to whoever's next. But the calls come from this console, this specific station, this specific seat. If nobody's sitting here, if the overnight shift runs with one less dispatcher and this console stays dark, there's nobody to hear the calls, there's nobody to care. You're talking about shutting down a dispatch position. People will die because we can't handle the call volume. People are already dying, Derek. They're dying because we handle calls that haven't happened yet, and our handling makes them happen. At least the ones who die from a slow response time die from something real, something human, not from this." He sat with that for a long time. I watched him think. I watched him look at the console, the chair, the headset, the screen that would show him the names and addresses of people he could save. And I watched him decide. "Okay," he said. We filed the paperwork the next morning. Derek requested a transfer to day shift. I submitted a facilities report flagging persistent hardware malfunctions at my console and recommending it be decommissioned pending a full technical review. Captain Okafor approved the transfer. The technical review was scheduled for February. In the meantime, the console sat dark. I kept working nights, 1 dispatcher instead of 2, handling the full county. The call volume was brutal, and my response time suffered, and I knew with absolute certainty that someone would eventually die because I was too slow, because there was only one of me, because the console next to mine was dark and empty. But they would die from real things, from human things, from the ordinary cruelty of distance and time and not enough ambulances, not from a voice on a line that shouldn't exist, offering help that was designed to destroy. The future dated calls never came back. Not to my console, not to Derek's day shift station, not to anyone. I checked the logs every week for 3 months. Nothing. I still work the overnight shift. I still answer every call. I'm still, despite everything, the person who cannot hear someone screaming and not respond. The calls didn't take that from me. They tried. They showed me that my need to help could be turned into a weapon. That my empathy was a leash, that every choice I made would cost someone something. And they were right about all of it. But the thing they got wrong, the thing Elaine got wrong, the thing I almost got wrong was thinking that the only options were to act or not act. There was a third option. You could refuse the terms entirely. You could say, "I will not play this game. I will not answer calls from a future that exists only to manipulate me. I will answer the phone when it rings with a real person on the other end, and I will send help, and sometimes help will arrive in time, and sometimes it won't. And that is the only weight I'm willing to carry. It's been 4 months since I shut down the console. Last week, the county hired a new overnight dispatcher to replace Derek. Her name is Carla. She's 26. She told me during orientation that she became a dispatcher because her best friend died in a car accident 2 years ago, and the 911 operator who took the call stayed on the line with her friend until the very end, and she wanted to be that person for someone else. I watched her sit down at the dark console, the one that had been mine, and Elaine's before me, and I watched her put on the headset and log in, and for one terrible moment I waited for the screen to light up with a timestamp from next week. It didn't. The console was quiet. Carla took her first call. A real one. Present tense. A man who'd fallen down his basement stairs, and she dispatched an ambulance, and her voice was calm and sure, and she did her job. I went home that night and I slept. And at 3:14 a.m., the exact time the cascade had ended, the exact time Tomas had been pronounced dead, The exact time that owns a piece of me I'll never get back. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text message from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Thank you for listening." The timestamp was from next week. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it, turned off my phone, and closed my eyes. Some calls you just don't answer.